Red rum. 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 Stop it. Red rum. Red rum.
Welcome to Franchise Killer, a podcast where we pick movie franchises or wannabe franchises, review them film by film, and see where things went wrong.
All right.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
That's Tony, man. That's Tony.
What is that backwards?
Chickies, bro.
I'm Reese. Across from me we have,
David.
to his left,
Irina.
to her left,
Tony.
except his name's not Tony.
Sounds like
it's
he's
Danny.
like from
No,
New York.
that's the fingers.
His little
name.
finger puppet.
Oh, yeah.
imaginary.
Sorry. Man, that's my bad then.
Tony sounds like an old lady smoker. My name's
I
Tony.
My name's
realize what
Marge.
it sounds like, and it actually sounds like you're very close, Irina. It sounds like the
Chocolate.
from SpongeBob.
What are they selling?
Exactly.
Red rum.
And
Eva, isam egde etarabole yelgan kurtz ani sol genetig dinner.
what?
Could you elaborate?
That was you, AJ.
Was it?
Was it?
AJ.
That for anyone, for our discerning listeners, is backwards. And getting lost in a strikingly elaborate hedge maze we have.
AJ.
Because he walked
It
backwards.
makes sense.
Yeah. And if you haven't caught on already or, read the title of the episode, we are talking about The Shining. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Ooh. This is one of the few Stephen King movies where it's not Stephen King's The Shining. No, they let you know. This is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. And I think Stephen King is happy about that.
Stephen King would let you know that too.
Yeah. The movie came out in 1980, directed by Stanley Kubrick, who has directed a number of massive classics. The Killing, Spartacus, Lolita, Dr. Strangelove, 2001, A Space Odyssey, A Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, Full Metal Jacket, and Eyes Wide Shut. Yep. One of my
Thanks,
personal
David.
favorites. Good job, though. I'm glad
I was ready.
I'm glad you were ready for it. The movie stars Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Scat Man Crothers, and Danny Lloyd, with a screenplay by Stanley Kubrick and Diane Johnson. It's based on The Shining by Stephen King.
Wait.
Kind of.
Are you sure?
Actually, I would still say mostly.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of kind of contention, at least from Stephen King and certain Stephen King diehards, about this being maybe not the best adaptation of his work. Stephen King is not a massive fan of it, even though it is basically proven to be the biggest Stephen King movie of them all, bar none. Like, I don't think any of the other Stephen King movies come close to touching The Shining.
Well, not only that, it's in the horror department, it's regarded as one of the best.
Yeah. But I think Stephen King was quoted as saying, in regards to the film, that it was really pretty to look at, really well structured. He made some kind of car analogy about being it's like a sleek car with no engine, like it was missing the soul of the work. But and in a way, I agree with him. But I think it's just a different take.
Yeah.
It's but that's for later.
It just comes down to the perspective of two different creatives. And like people always throw out that really famous phone call, apparently, where Stephen King was on the phone with Stanley Kubrick, and Stanley Kubrick said something along the lines of, like, don't you think that ghost stories are fundamentally positive? And King said, why? And he basically said, well, that means that in the afterlife, we're still here. So I would say that's pretty positive, right?
Yeah.
Stephen King said, why would you, well, what about hell? And Kubrick basically says, I don't believe in hell. And yeah, so there's this difference in perspectives and philosophies, and that's why you have completely different stories here, both very interesting and engaging, and I would argue, like, I can enjoy both equally.
Yeah. And obviously, during the recap of the story, we'll get into some comparisons from the book, because we do have at least 2 people who have read the book here. So y'all will be able to interject at random points throughout the story wherever you see fit. Like changes that are interesting. We don't have to it doesn't. This is more about the movie. But if there's something that struck you as an interesting change that either worked or didn't work, feel free.
Okay.
Anyway, for those that are new to this show, on this podcast, we first go over our thoughts on the film before revisiting it for the episode. Then we dive into the story, break it down bit by bit, and talk about the more significant moments. Then, towards the end of the show, we give our brief reviews and numbered scores, along with an analysis on the health of the franchise and whether or not this film hurt it. So, Irina,
Yeah.
it just seems weird even asking this question, but had you seen The Shining before your prep for this episode?
Oh yeah, several times. I think instead of saying when I first saw it, because I don't remember that, I think my favorite watching of The Shining was actually when we were in Colorado, and I think we had rented a cabin or something, and we all decided, we're gonna watch The Shining now because we're gonna visit the Stanley Hotel like the next day or something. So that was perfect.
And the Stanley Hotel was what the inside sets were modeled after.
Actually, no. That it was what the story was based off of.
Are you going to be the actually no guy throughout this episode?
I mean, I wrote it all down beforehand. If you want me to go through it.
Written on that list are actually no.
The interior was actually based and modeled after the Ahwahnee Hotel in Yosemite National Park, California.
Good to know. So what is the Stanley
The ghost story was based off the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
David, I guess I'll just go right on to you.
Hey.
Had you seen this movie before?
Sure have. I, as everyone probably knows by now, am not the biggest horror movie fan out there. But as I think I was in high school when I first saw this, and my mom told me, and she's not a big movie person, so for her to bring it up, but she told me we should watch this movie, and I was like, I don't know about that. I know this is a horror movie. But she said it was kind of a classic that is a must watch. And I watched it, and I was terrified.
How old did you say?
I don't want to say.
Say it.
I was probably like 17.
So you were working at the theater at this
I
time.
was working at the movie theater at this time. That's a classic one. We haven't said that in a while.
Brought it back.
Yeah, but yeah, on top of that, though, I've also read the book. I've been to the Stanley Hotel and the exterior location, which was the Overlook in Mount Hood, Oregon.
So you've been pretty much baptized in The Shining.
He
baptized
washed
in
himself
blood.
in the waters.
Or blood.
Another person not too keen on horror. Let's get. Had you seen this before, AJ?
No, I hadn't. I remember the trailers for it and not really being interested, but it seemed to be popular, so...
Yeah, you remember watching the trailers in the 80s?
80s?
What did you watch?
I mean, I know they've got a 70s classic Volkswagen Beetle, or not a Beetle, the Volkswagen bus that they road trip in, but...
What? I am grasping at straws here. What is he?
Steve Carell?
I don't know.
Wait, which one?
Little Miss Sunshine.
Oh my gosh. For one, not a franchise starter. 2, completely different genre. 3, like two
Not
to
a
3
horror.
decades later than The Shining.
There's a lot of things wrong.
I was about to say, I don't remember them going through Colorado on their trip to California, but...
Yeah, that's in the deleted scenes.
But I had seen the Shining. In fact, I'm not horror prone. Is that a term?
Horror inclined?
Yeah, but it's Kubrick and it's a classic. So I kind of blocked out some memories of it. So it's almost like a fresh watch for me here.
Wow.
for all
So you must have
intents and
been
purposes.
pretty long time ago since you had seen it.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, Noah.
Yeah, I saw this, and just like Irina over here, she recalled a beautiful memory, being cramped in the teensy tiny cabin that we were, and we're like,
It
great
wasn't
idea,
that
let's-
tiny.
It was pretty small. I think it's kind of nostalgic because of that. When you think back, I remember it being pretty cold and everyone was just huddled together.
Oh yeah,
a little
it was
bit.
a lot of fun.
Good times.
I remember this, and obviously I've seen this movie a lot. I think Irina and I and Noah even were like, yeah, this is like a movie we've probably seen 10 plus times. But this was one of those two that our mom would inundate us with. This and The Exorcist. Like, anytime I would see a scary movie and be like, oh, this is the scariest thing I've ever seen, she'd be like, now wait a minute. And then you'd get the reel of all the various scary shots from the movie from her. And that never really worked. But when I finally sat down and watched this movie, I saw this at a pretty young age. It kind of creeped me out to the core.
Well, probably
how-
because you only were given the shots of horror without the buildup. Like,
and I don't think she understood that.
Yeah.
But that's,
I like how you picture yourself sitting down to watch a horror movie. Like, okay, like I'm 5. I'm
I'm
gonna
ready.
go ahead and turn on the TV, put on The Shining.
I just like to imagine you guys sitting down for a double feature, watching The Exorcist followed by The Shining. It's like, all right, kids,
no,
let's
yeah,
get the popcorn.
It wasn't quite like that. But
Pop, pop.
pop, 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 pop.
call
a
back
good-
to our
good
episode.
segue.
Yep. All right. Before we get into our story, David, do you want to give us our Shining themed call to action?
It's funny you should say that. Let me get in the right headspace here.
He's really taking his time with
Hold
this
on,
one.
hold
He's
on.
going method.
He's shining.
Reese, do you know the kind of pressure that I am under in this podcast? Do you understand that I am asked by all of you to do this call to action, to ask people to come here and listen to us, to give us a 5-star on Apple? You don't know. No, you don't get it.
I'm sorry I came into this room.
No, you don't. You don't understand the kind of pressure. You don't. And we need people to give us that 5-star. Because if we don't, we're not going to succeed. I'm going to bash your freaking head in, man.
Dang, that was intense.
Also, maybe follow us on Instagram and Twitter.
There you go.
Little golf clap there. I liked it. Good. You went method for a second. I loved it.
You said Shining inspired.
Now do that 27 more times.
273, actually.
All right, Noah, you want to take...
It's 37, David.
You want to lay that story on us?
I'll lay it on you.
Mom,
Yeah?
do you really want to go and live in that hotel for the winter?
Sure I do. It'll be lots of fun.
Yeah, I guess so.
For some people, solitude and isolation can of itself become a problem. What you did? I killed you and Danny.
You did this to me. Didn't you? How could you? How could you?
Here's Johnny.
Jack Torrance, a writer longing for some peace and quiet to write his book, decides to take his wife Wendy and son Danny to the secluded Overlook Hotel, where they will be staying for the winter. Danny, a boy with a suspiciously omniscient finger, has a premonition of the events to come, and let me tell you, it doesn't bode well. They eventually leave to the hotel where they meet Dick, who immediately notices Danny's shine and warns him of the dangers of the hotel. They are then left to the lonely hotel, completely isolated.
Do you know Dick has a shine too?
A big shine.
Oh, God, guys. That is not how we're starting off the story portion. With a dick joke, get it?
Hey,
Well, it was a...
you don't hear me
was. It already
hollering
was.
over here.
Wow.
All
How
right.
about a scat joke?
No.
That's a pretty shitty joke.
You know
AJ.
what scats? Bears.
What?
I had to think about it. All right, so the opening to this movie, I am just reminded of, like, they meant it when they said epic horror on the box art. This is epic horror. You get these huge shots of the mountainscapes, and the music is kind of simmering under, like, it's this iconic, like, ambient music that's not really
Immediate immersion.
You get the sense of the scale of this thing, and you're like, they don't do horror movies like this often at all. I see this movie a lot, but I always forget how striking this opening shot is. Of course, we see the Torrances in their little Volkswagen making their way through the winding roads to the Overlook Hotel. What are y'all's thoughts of the opening shot?
See, it was a Volkswagen.
I mean, no, I think... yeah, it's not a Volkswagen. But it is a very striking scene. I think that it lets you know where you're headed. If they're driving, they're letting you actually know. But I think I saw that the mountains they're actually driving through are supposed to be the Shining Mountains, as were stated by the Native Americans that lived in that region. So Kubrick is just way ahead of the game, guys.
Calm down.
Also, the opening song, was it Dies Irae, which is basically a 13th century Latin hymn that describes the day of wrath, Judgment Day. Basically, they were using that in the 19th century to basically they sung that during Christian mass for the dead.
So yeah, the Torrances take residence in the Overlook Hotel after signing a deal with this strange guy that holds his hands up really weird, like a dinosaur during their meeting.
Praying mantis.
Yep.
Praying mantis.
It is one of those things where you're like, Stanley Kubrick is a perfectionist of a director. And you have to know that he told this guy to sit in this really strange, awkward position and just, put your hands like in front of you like this, where they're... I'm like, why? I don't know. Everything
Just
about
do it,
this,
trust me.
Everything about this movie is kind of like off and unsettling. Even the way people act is just like not normal.
Gosh.
You know?
Yeah. Dick, whenever he's first introduced, is very odd.
Yeah.
Just the way he is looking at people, and he's so positive, yet it's just really like...
It's like, why don't you blink?
Yeah. Well,
I weirdly think Scat Man Crothers is one of the more natural performances in this, even though he is very weird.
oh, no, it felt perfect for the movie, but it was just, off-putting, which is just like it.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is that he's the only character with, like, what I would call warmth. You know, like, everyone else is kind of cold. And then he anytime that Halloran is in the room, you just kind of feel a little more at ease. And I think that's actually a really good element to have in here. I know that Stephen King thinks the whole movie is just kind of lacking in warmth, but he's like the one character where, like, when he's present, you're like, oh, he's here, though.
I like to think that Kubrick was like, we're going to have warmth, and it's going to be you, Scat Man. We're going to do it until you provide warmth to this movie. And they're going to take as many takes as they need.
And I guess we can talk about the cast real quick. We've got Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Scat Man Crothers, and Danny Lloyd as Danny Torrance. You know, I really like these core four characters. They all bring something completely different to the table. We have Jack Nicholson, of course, he kind of starts off this movie as his delivery is almost like not... I don't know. He's not fully present in the role. Like, it's like he's pretending to go through the motions of, like, I'm a normal person. Yeah. And throughout the movie, the real Jack Nicholson comes out. It's weird.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But we'll get to that. But I think his performance grows over time, and it was probably an intentional choice from the beginning to have him, like, almost putting on this facade as the straight man. But every time he says something, it's always with this kind of, like,
Like, sure, I'm not a serial killer.
I like to, honestly, Jack Nicholson to me is he's like an alien, right? And the more normal he has to act, the more forced it feels. You're like, this alien doesn't know how to be human. Make him act like an alien.
Yeah.
And Jack Nicholson, the farther he gets, the more alien-like he gets.
Kind of like Jeff Goldblum, too.
Yeah, definitely.
So Shelley Duvall notoriously had a lot of trouble during this movie. Was the target of a lot of Stanley Kubrick's ire. But I think, this is not a bad performance. I think
No,
it is.
it's not.
She is the one person who is like us, observing everything and being like, this is not right. Nothing about this is right. In the beginning, I think she's the most, natural, normal person. At least for me, it's like, yes, you're acting like how a mother should, and you're the way you're treating Danny. The moment when she is explaining, the incident with Danny's arm to the what was that? What's that lady's occupation?
It's a doctor.
Yeah, I think she was
just a doctor.
A doctor, yeah.
Yeah, just all that stuff is like, this is a believable, down to earth performance. Of course, she gets a little more manic as it goes along, and her. I think she does it
for good cause.
Yeah. Well, also to know a little bit about herself as an actress, she was never intending to be an actress. She kind of like stumbled into it because she was basically found talent. And I think everyone that worked with her loved her openness and willingness to like try her best with everything. And so she just came off as very raw and natural.
Yeah.
So that's why everyone loved casting her at the time.
I think it was Kubrick actually who really wanted her for this role, which is just funny that they ended up having so many problems.
I think it was from her performance in something called Three Women or something like that, where she was in a role in a film that was a little more serious than what she had done before. And so he was pulled by that performance and thought, oh, okay, like I think I can have her in this picture. But I think their two kind of work ethics are very different. And she's a very kind of like, how would I call it? She's kind of a watery person, you know?
Yeah.
Well, he liked her because he wanted her because she did seem so fragile.
Yeah.
Like he wanted like the most fragile of person. Like there's a slight wind and she'll fall over.
Exactly.
So Kubrick's like, oh yeah, I can abuse this woman right into the role I want her to be.
I don't think that was his intention completely.
Well,
that kind of ended up what happened, but
yeah, it was a reversal of what the actual character was from the book, which is one of the big challenges from Stephen King. But so Kubrick specifically wanted Jack Nicholson for his part. Like he basically courted him right away, first phone call when he knew he was doing it. And famously, because Kubrick is known to be meticulous and simultaneously I can't even talk.
He's a
right
micromanager.
now. Yeah, micromanager, but also wants the performers to perform, and he gave Jack Nicholson a lot of leeway to basically act, and he does a lot of takes, but it's also doing many takes to experiment, not just find a perfect iteration.
Exactly.
And I think with Wendy, she wanted the firm direction where Kubrick was like, I want you to bring yourself to the table, and she kind of maybe
didn't know what to do with that.
grow. That it wasn't the environment that she wanted. So it wasn't a click there, where Jack Nicholson literally would make suggestions to how he did the scene and that kind of thing, and Kubrick let him have free reign on the character almost.
Well, I almost feel like sometimes when I would look into things about Jack Nicholson, he's almost he'll just go with it sort of a personality where I don't think that Shelley Duvall was prepared for that, because she almost seemed like one of those like she was a straight A student, and every other project she had been on, everyone talked about how she was always ready, she was always on time, willing to work. She kind of, like you said, expected to just kind of get it done. Mm-hmm. Whereas she didn't. I don't think she really had the kind of like creative mindset where you just sort of intuit things Whereas Jack Nicholson, like, there was a point where scripts were just arriving to them the day of, like, they didn't get to
They were
practice.
color-coded.
Yeah. And so he straight up just said, oh, yeah, I just wait until they bring a new one. I don't even bother studying the script.
Yeah,
So, like,
so-
he just kind of went with that.
I get the sense that Jack Nicholson is the kind of person who's just a force of nature, and he's so comfortable in this environment and so confident that he
He has a swagger.
like a very
Yeah.
little
Yes.
amount of prep and he'll be fine. Whereas Shelley Duvall's someone who's maybe a little more like, I have to, very structured, as you said,
Yeah.
and has to have everything laid out and practiced.
Has a
Right.
routine down.
And then just Stanley Kubrick threw
Yeah.
a wrench in that plan.
Yeah, and she's like, I don't know how to work with this.
my hair's falling out.
So she, like, I mean, not going too much into her backstory, but, like, just before she shot this, Paul Simon broke up with her. So, like, she was in the midst of a breakup and, like, crying on the plane flight over. And she's, in all the interviews I've seen with her, I've never heard her speak a negative word about Kubrick either.
Yeah.
So I think there was, like, still offset a good relationship, but it's just, this was not a good environment for her. Like, it's not her style.
Yeah, I think I remember saying it's like, she doesn't regret any of it, but she
Right.
would never do it again.
Yeah, so anyone that thinks Kubrick is evil, maybe he did, like, toe the line a little bit, but it's more like a meshing of ideas or you know, philosophies
So
on things
I kind
that
of think
didn't
of it
work.
as Whiplash movie where
Oh, yeah.
he
that guy.
is extremely like just abusive and
Tempo!
teaching. Yeah, he's almost abusive, even though he wants the perfection, but he's abusive of the person until they get.
Oh my
there.
gosh, it is J.K. Simmons from Whiplash.
Yeah,
It's
that's
well,
what I'm saying.
I know.
You
I'm agreeing.
kind of see this over and over with different kinds of artists in different forms, where it's you kind of get to this point where if you're working under a master, there's that question of like, is this abuse or are they honing my abilities? You know, and
exactly.
the answer is both.
Yeah.
Like, I think
Yeah,
you are honing
answer
your
is yes.
abilities, and it is kind of abuse. But
Yeah.
it's like, are you willing to take that abuse for the sake of that kind of end?
Yeah,
you
because
know,
I do. I don't know if it's fully the reason, but I do think she suffered some irreparable damage from this movie, unfortunately.
Poor girl.
But let's move on to Scat Man Crothers. We did talk about him a little bit. Love this character, Dick Halloran. I think he really knows how to, straddle the fence in not being creepy in his discussions with Danny, but also showing that they both share this power. And I understand that this scene where he's talking to Danny after he's given him after he gave him some ice cream, and this is after the Torrance family has been led up to they call it an apartment, but it is just the room in this hotel. Dick kind of pulls him aside and says, "Let me get you some ice cream, and we'll talk while your parents are getting things sorted out." This whole scene is really good. Apparently, it took like 1 million takes, but I think Scat Man Crothers does an excellent job. He really nails that. Like, this is how you talk to a kid. Like, this is, but also impart wisdom. I just really like it, and I think he's perfectly cast in this.
I like how when he's talking to him, he does have that tone of voice that you have when you're talking to a toddler, where it's like, yeah, very kind of over the top. Yeah.
over
And
the
then-
top, but also talking to him like an equal.
Yeah. Well, I just like when Danny asks him if he's scared, and he goes from that happy face to like, what? Like, his face just drops, and you're like, oh, so there's something happening.
But I was thinking about people's voices in this movie and just how distinctive they are. Like, Scatman Crothers has this very syrupy voice almost, where it's like comforting to listen to. Jack has this very, like, I don't know, it's very sarcastic, very
Aggressive.
using humor to put people down. But the way he talks is every line is so calculated.
It's kind of like
Hawkish.
laced with this
Yeah.
a little bit of venom in it,
Yeah.
you know? Like, everything he says is not really actually what he's thinking
Yeah.
sometimes.
Even Danny and Wendy too. They have these just very distinct voices that are so perfectly calculated. Like Danny has the dual, like the Danny voice and the Tony voice.
Yeah.
I was just thinking
What'd you
about.
say?
I was just thinking about the texture of the sounds in this movie. Like it just seems like everything was calculated to be different but harmonious at the same time.
Yeah.
That's kind of just an observation I had. But
I'm proud of you.
we'll move on. Last up, Danny, played by Danny.
There you go.
Well, Jack is played by Jack.
True, that's true. Yeah, you're right. I don't know why I didn't catch that.
And Wendy's played. Oh,
He likes Jack too.
This is the first time I've actually sat down and watched this movie while like thinking about doing an episode or actually thinking about it more critically. And this has to rank pretty high up there in terms of child performances.
Yeah.
This kid there's a number of shots of him that they're long no cut shots where he has to perform, like moving from one side of the room to the other, writing the red rum, doing all that, and then I was just impressed by how long this kid was able to keep up the performance. Like I feel like normally with a kid you'd have to frequently cut away, just like, hey, they nailed that moment, now we can cut.
Yeah.
But I was continuously impressed by Danny. I think he does a great job of showing that he has this power as well, and he doesn't really know what to do with it. He's Tony.
the back and forth with Tony is really good too.
Yeah.
And I believe he did that improv, didn't he, as a kid?
Yeah,
well, he did the finger. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like the obviously the voice was written, but he's the one who improv the finger, and Kubrick was like, "Yeah, go with that."
Yeah, he actually did that during the casting. That's what set him apart, the on the spot creativity of it, and that's why Kubrick picked him.
Well, it seems to work well. I seem to believe that he didn't even know he was in a horror film to begin with. Like, Kubrick made him specifically separate from all the horror elements so he wouldn't be traumatized.
It's actually kind of sweet.
Yeah.
I saw that interview, and he was saying that when he realized it was when he watched it a couple of years later when he was older, and he was like, "Holy crap!"
That's not red rum, that's murder.
I thought this was a fun pirate film.
So this is a good opportunity to talk about this movie's namesake, the Shine itself. There's a whole lot of interesting discussions I think we can have on this, especially. So first we had our conversation between Dick and Danny about the Shine, and it kind of goes into the darker side of it, where like some places have a shine as well. The Overlook, you might say, has a shine. And then the room 237 is brought up. What?
Sorry,
Go ahead.
go on.
What do y'all think about this movie's interpretation of The Shine? You guys who've read the book, this is kind of where I would like to hear, maybe some contrasts, if there are any, and symbolism as well of the 237, all this stuff.
Right.
So it's interesting because Irene and I both read this book as we were traveling to visit the Stanley Hotel where this was based off of.
Man, that's the best time to read The Shine.
That's why we did
it was a perfect moment.
Yeah.
But I think you might have a better memory for this, Irina, because
we can tag team that.
I'm just saying I don't remember much from the book other than the fact that it kind of focused more on Danny rather than how the movie focuses more on Jack. But it felt more childish than I remember the movie feeling.
Right.
I imagine that's because Jack Nicholson is such a powerhouse that he was just like, oh gosh.
I think it's also what Kubrick took away from the novel, where I think there was a quote somewhere where Kubrick actually said that Stephen King's writing was weak. And so he, who did he write the script with? Diane Johnson?
Yeah.
And so he liked her work on a book she had just recently written, and he had asked her to write this script with him. Because he found her to be a stronger writer. And a little interesting factoid about him, Kubrick only did films based on books because he thought writers, like novelists, were stronger in writing a screenplay than actual screenwriters.
Really?
So, yeah, I think he just felt that they had more depth.
I'm kind of tempted to agree with him.
I think there is some truth to it, but going along with this, the two of them sat down and they annotated Stephen King's The Shining, and they kind of winnowed away all the fluff and then separated everything into core scenes and what they wanted to pull out of it. So I think the role of Danny's father became a little more front and center, possibly because of Kubrick's relationship with Jack Nicholson being stronger, because I seem to remember that Wendy had more lines, but he cut them away because I guess she wasn't, up for it the way he thought she would be. So Jack Nicholson takes front and center, but on top of that, I think Kubrick found this man descending into madness more fascinating than the kind of unreal idea of a kid with psychic abilities. That one was more just kind of like an interesting supernatural addition to the story. Whereas Stephen King, that was more front and center.
Yep. So what about 237? Did y'all want to talk about that at all? Is there weird stuff around that?
Yeah, David, is there weird stuff around that?
Okay. We're going to save the intense conspiracy around the actual numbers.
Oh,
237.
there's an actual conspiracy.
Oh,
Okay.
there's a huge conspiracy.
Oh, is there?
Great.
Just you wait. But the actual room number that this was based off was actually 217 at the Stanley Hotel.
Yeah.
Where like a boiler went off and like a chambermaid or somebody almost died or something. I don't know. It's not a big deal. But point is, they chose to change the number because they didn't want to affect business or something there.
At the hotel,
weird.
yeah.
Yeah, it was actually in the contract they couldn't use that room number because they didn't want people afraid to stay in that room.
Yeah.
So they changed one
totally
number.
Understandable.
Cool. So just before we move on, again to you book readers, let's hear like an out of 10. How close is this to the story so far? Like how
So far?
I'm just curious because I've never read the book.
I would say 5 out of 10.
I was leaning towards a 5 as well. Like it hits some good points, but misses a lot.
Is the biggest change that it is focusing more on Jack?
Well, no, actually, the biggest change would, in my mind, be the dynamic between the three characters is very different.
Okay.
I think the whole setting is pretty spot on. They even reference all the kind of a lot of the shady history, even though they don't go into a lot of depth about that. It's still there. But the mother, Wendy, she's actually a much... Like, in this movie, she's pretty resourceful, but she's a much stronger-willed character in the book. There's a better relationship between her and Jack. Jack also, he's a more likable character.
Yeah.
And his descent into madness is more apparent. There's an actual moment where you can see where he clearly, like...
Don't go in the boiler room.
...has that switch. Mm-hmm. And so he's also more front and center taking care of the hotel than Jack in the film is. Jack in the film is mostly just writing.
I want to say
and
most
Wendy
of the book
is taking care of most of the hotel.
Most of the book, I feel like when I think of Jack, I think of him taking care of things, and that's what I remember in the book.
He's always going down to the boiler room. Yeah,
I kind of like the change. Then I think I like that this movie's different because I would not want to lose all these scenes of Jack on the typewriter
They're
doing
different.
all this.
They're just completely different.
Right.
Exactly. I'm glad the movie it takes its own lane. I actually think some of the best adaptations are things that take their own spin on it.
So then the question is for you guys, what do you like this departure?
Yeah.
I do too. I think because I was able to grow up watching The Shining and then read the book at my leisure. Okay. I think if I had read the book and I loved it, I could imagine disliking the movie, and so I think it's just the fortune of me being able to enjoy them separately.
Kind of like a different story.
Yeah.
they're
know.
completely different. So if you can separate that, then you should be able to love both.
So it's kind of like a Twilight and 50 Shades, right?
Exactly,
Mm-hmm.
exactly like
Yeah, the
that.
books are amazing. But we talked about the script a little bit. I don't know if we mentioned already that Stephen King himself actually wrote a treatment and delivered
Yeah.
it to Kubrick, and Kubrick notoriously didn't even read it.
Yep. Exactly.
Do you know what's funny about this though? Is I read something. This was on IMDb Facts. That's my great research that I bring to the table here. I read a fact that Stanley Kubrick's assistant was kind of in the other room, and Stanley Kubrick has his main room where he's reading books
Oh,
to
yeah.
get ideas for the next script that he's going to, or next film that he's going to put to paper.
Right.
Avidly
Or put to
reading.
film. Yeah. But he got, and she remembered hearing him every time he'd finish a book. She'd hear a thud, like him throwing it against the, or he wouldn't finish it, like he'd just lose interest and throw it
Like
against
Jack
the wall.
throwing a ball against the wall.
Yeah, but when he got to The Shining, it was like all silence in
Yeah.
there, and so he can call Stephen King a bad writer all he wants, but apparently he was like his ideas shone through,
Yeah.
like he had good
Something
ideas.
caught his attention.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something caught his attention, but I feel like he probably thought Stephen King didn't dig deep enough, I guess,
Yeah.
But I think
He says
Kubrick,
to the 1,000-page book.
well, the thing is, like, I can see both sides. Like, I can see how frustrating it would be being an author that someone would dismiss your stuff as like, oh, it's weak, and then make their own artwork off of it. But at the same time, Kubrick is an artist in his own right.
Yeah,
And if he gets the rights to make this film, then you should allow them to enable that.
yeah,
Well, especially since Kubrick was the bigger name at the time. So
Yeah,
King,
exactly.
The Shining was maybe his third big work where he really kind of made it big. I think Carrie, and then forget the second
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
But so The Shining was his kind of landmark, and then got picked up right away. So the fact that Kubrick reached out to him to pick it up was kind of an honor, and then so it's kind of a really big slap in the face that they broke ways, especially since on Kubrick's other projects, he really intensively worked with the authors on writing scripts and being involved in story and stuff like that.
yeah. Sorry, this first portion wasn't as focused on the movie's plot.
Yeah, sorry
This
about
was
that.
no, this is good. This is more kind of table setting because
It's an introduction.
They had only gotten to the Overlook Hotel at this point. I'm
Right.
pretty
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So
well, they got there. They spoke a little bit with Dick and
Tete-a-tete.
and then he left, and now they're on their own.
yeah, which we did cover. So we talked about that. But with that said, let's get into the meat of this story, and we'll kind of dive more into the actual plot points going forward.
Right.
Tensions begin to rise as Jack descends into madness. He starts to have terrible nightmares, picks up drinking again, and even makes out with a naked hag.
Does he actually pick up drinking though? Because it's
There's
That's
a
a
whole
good
thing.
question.
It's a whole
It's a
thing.
good question. On the other hand, Danny, having worse and worse visions, uses his shine to communicate with Dick, seeking his help. Jack, entirely bonkers at this point, attends a soiree where he meets Grady, a dead butler, who tells Jack he must correct his family. Shortly after this, Wendy finds Jack's manuscript, and to her horror, it's page after page of the same sentence over and over. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Jack sees this and confronts her, threatening her life. Wendy knocks him out cold with a baseball bat and locks him in the pantry. She then tries to escape with Danny to find that the radio equipment has been sabotaged. Jack, freed by Grady, grabs an axe and begins to hunt for his family.
Wow, that last part's really going to have a lot to it.
so before the total descent into madness, what do y'all think about the kind of lackadaisical pacing of this movie? Where it's not okay, I'll say it. It is slow, but it's deliberate. There's a lot of just kind of lounging, people doing, wandering around, the odd conversation here and there, the occasional weirdness before things really hit the fan. does this pacing work for you guys? Are you engrossed in it, or are you kind of looking at your watch, hoping it'll hurry up and get to the climax?
I think it reminds me a lot of there's this rising trend in psychological horror again, where I think a lot of people are kind of doing the same thing, where you're seeing everyday moments, but with a little something odd kind of added in. And I think they, whether intentionally or unintentionally, kind of use this as that kind of ruler for how they pace their psychological horrors. And it's I think it's meant to be disconcerting, because if you just kind of jump into the horror immediately, it breaks everything.
Yeah.
You kind of have to enjoy a moment of this is normal but also surreal at the same time.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
There's a movie that came out not too long ago that really reminds me of this, pacing wise. Gore Verbinski's A Cure for Wellness.
Yeah.
Where that's a long movie, but it has to be long because it's really it's trying to slowly pull you into that kind of, I don't know, dreamlike nightmare scenario. It's trying to ease you in, not just hit you over the head with it.
Right.
But then they do hit you over the head with it.
Well, because it kind of, by the end of the film, you start to think, okay, when did the craziness actually start? And you can't really trace it, because everything was kind of muddied to begin with.
It almost seemed like right when he got there, it was opened to the fact that he was crazy the whole time.
Like, he was already acting kind of odd.
Yeah. So, gosh, that kind of brings me to what my favorite scene in this entire movie is, and that's the where he is at the bar for the first time and drinking again, and that dialogue.
Oh yeah,
my goodness.
So it's haunting almost. Yeah. It's not as creepy as the Grady guy, but it's like something about the glisten in that bartender's eyes.
Yeah.
And just
unsettling.
That underlit bar that's just shining light up into their faces. It's so, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
But just Jack Nicholson going on that kind of monologue about him not abusing his kid and how he's slowly, at first he's kind of defending himself and saying, I would never do this. And eventually he ends up at a point of, well, the kid kind of deserved it. And
well, it's weird how in this movie, every single character has their own moment of a therapy session almost, where, Danny is talked to by the doctor. And I think it almost seems like she has some kind of like children's therapy background or something. And then almost immediately after that, she starts questioning Wendy in kind of the same way. And then Wendy has her little confession time, where, oh, it's, a thing you do 100 times with a kid, but this time it was just a little too much strength. Here, like, it's really kind of showing almost like Jack's relationship with alcohol and going out to bars as being that's where he actually opens up, and kind of talks to the bartender and, reveals like, this is what I'm struggling with. And every time he's with Wendy, he's very kind of closed off and almost only saying things that are kind of like not
cutting.
Well, he's straight up emotionally
not cutting,
abusive.
but even before that, like when she brings him breakfast, it's just very short answers, nothing really deep. Like she's like, "Hey, how's your morning? Oh, good. How's the writing? Oh, great." Like he's there's no connection there.
Well, the thing, his performance is you can tell he is a different person underneath, and every time someone talks to him, especially his wife, he is trying to stifle this demon that's inside of him,
right?
And just kind of give some offhanded remark to get them to go away, so he doesn't like blow a gasket or something. Like it's always this dismissive short remark, where it's like he's trying to contain it or control himself because he knows that the dark side of him can come out. But let's bring it back to what you were saying about Jack talking about Danny and how long the incident, we'll call it, and how there's so many moments in this movie where things are inconsistent. Mm-hmm. Like he talks about how, oh yeah, that happened 3 years ago. Whereas I believe Wendy not too long ago had said it happened 6 months ago or something like that.
Right.
And this carries on throughout the whole movie where there's all of these just
distortions.
Let's talk about like the set design, just the things people say, things in the background that are there at one point and then not. Mm-hmm. Why does this movie do this? AJ, do you have any thoughts on this? Maybe that I guess we can go into like kind of the cinematography as well because we have not talked about this yet.
Yeah, so and I'm kind of pull us back to the point of the pace here and how it's kind of meandering. I would say it's more exploratory because it's actually establishing the hotel itself as a character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we're actually getting to know the environment that these people are in and what they're up against. And even as Halloran says himself, even places have shines. If you burn toast, there's that thing that kind of taints it and lingers on. So this hotel itself, they established the Indian burial ground aspect of it, which some of that thematically was in the original story. But Kubrick himself, I mean, he's probably textbook 101 stuff, first thing you do in film school, I'm sure. But he himself started as a photographer, and that's how he got into what he's doing. And so at heart, he is kind of a cinematographer. So he's meticulous, as has been stated, and he really takes the approach of mise en scène, which is basically everything for the setting and the scene that you see on screen is all important. So that's why Kubrick himself, I mean, was a master at using a deep shot where even stuff in the background is in focus, which is technically hard to do. I mean, he had special lenses made that NASA used from Zeiss, who made, the lens for the Hubble telescope and stuff like that.
NASA, you say?
Yeah. And I mean, he had connections that he pulled in, and he was a tinkerer, experimenter. That's why there's so many takes, and that's why he's so kind of lauded as a genius and stuff like that. It's not like one director doing a million takes of, oh, say this word with this different inflection. It's no, experiment, try different things. He would get down, on the ground and look up with his little special lens to actually get the shot of how he would see it and want to frame it and compose it himself. And actually this movie was the first, not the very first, but the first major use of Steadicam. And so they actually developed the flip view. So a lot of the scenes of Danny riding his trike through the halls from that low perspective gives you that eeriness, like something is following him. And there's a heavy, heavy use of tracking shots in this movie.
And can I also talk about how well the sound design is paired with these tracking shots? Yeah. Especially the trike scene. It's like that noise of the trike going over the wood-paneled floor and over to the carpets.
And then, so duality is a heavy motif in this. And even the tracking shots as they're first introduced to the hotel, they're getting the tour. We go from dark hallways to light, from colorful, new, modern stuff to the Native American motif to the classy, the grand piano, and then through the gold ballroom. Like everything as his tracking is focused on the movement of the people as the scene, the frame is following with them. And then, like you said, so the duality of it, we have things which is a trademark Kubrick-esque, whichever adjective you prefer, hallmark of the straight shot of someone centered and then a symmetrical thing on either side, but they're kind of conflicting. So, you may have a painting that's super colorful and abstract, and then you have a black and white photograph on the other side of your composition. So there's so much to pick apart, and so people kind of pull things into meaning. We'll talk about this later, but it's because Kubrick is so meticulous in putting details that add texture to that really create the scenery. Everything in the scene is important to him because it creates that lifelike aspect of the scene itself is a living, breathing thing with the characters themselves. Yeah. And that's one of the brilliant things about this movie. So he's also a heavy user of bold color. So we've got red and blue strongly on Wendy and Danny. He's always in. Danny's always in a blue sweater with like a red collar. Wendy is often in, dark blue with the red boots. When they're together, those red and blue things are kind of, I don't want to make a concrete, thematic statement on those, but they're definitely aligned with things. Kubrick actually likes to subvert or flip things on their head from thematically. Typically we associate green with life, like trees and plants and stuff, but Kubrick actually aligns green with death. So what's the most famous scene that stands out in your mind with green in it?
Harry Potter.
Well, actually, it's funny that you say
movie.
that.
Oh.
It's funny that you say that. I have the movie on in the background, and he's in the gold room, and all the tables are green.
Yep.
Which, who sits at those tables at the end?
He's walking past
Dead
all the
people.
tables.
Yeah.
all the deceased people.
I was just thinking the same thing, Reese.
Well,
The only other
Also
use of
room
green is room
237.
237, the carpet and the bathroom, all green.
True.
And the grass outside.
And then the other
hedges.
major thing is the sheets that Halloran is laying on in his bed
Interesting.
in Miami before he comes back. So everything else is kind of a neutral brown, yellow, interspersed. And also Jack, as he has those episodes, those shots where he's kind of staring off at them kind of menacingly while they're outside playing in the snow, Danny and Wendy are wearing red and blue. He's wearing a green cable knit sweater. When
Interesting.
when Jack is snaps at Wendy because she comes in, it's going to snow tonight. She's wearing the bright red boots, blue trench coat kind of thing, or robe. He's wearing green button down.
I also think he has a green tie on at the beginning.
He does.
Too.
Yeah, he does have a green tie on at the beginning. So when he turns into her and basically goes off on her like she's going to make him a sandwich, being all nice and stuff, and he just rips her head off for giving him attention and tears up the paper and drops the F-bomb on his wife. Like he's wearing a green, and that's like each time that he descends into that demonic, evil, whatever, what have you, he's wearing green. So you have that kind of thing. Also, so back to the background lighting, Kubrick uses lighting a lot of natural, practical lighting.
I should say before you go into it that the cinematographer on this was John Alcott. Just to give him some credit, this it looks amazing.
Yeah, so cinematographers or directors of photography with Kubrick are kind of they can be tense because of how involved Kubrick was, but a lot of times, especially in his early works, he was deeply close with him on a personal level, and so if they knew how he worked, and so for example, the director of photography, cinematographer here, Alcott, he was the one that got him, I think, introduced to the creator of the Steadicam, got that in, made that special telescope-looking thing where he could fit lenses on to get the shot himself. So it definitely involved, for sure. It wasn't just, kind of a name on there. But also when we're exploring the hotel with Danny and that thump, 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 every time we see the twins, or anytime there's death later on, like in the kitchen, we see bright red fire extinguishers, fire alarm bells, exit signs, also on either side of the dividing line of the scene on screen. So those are all kind of alarming things, or exit, emergency versus, escape. So there's so much of that peppered in that really brings that texture that you can, sink your teeth into, that Kubrick puts in there, because before he even does any camera work, he knows kind of what he's going for. And then he lets the actors bring their talent to it. But that's that phrase, the mise en scène is building the set. And like he's so heavily involved in building that set for that reason.
Yeah, there are very few directors that are more intentional than Kubrick, and just they will literally set everything up to exactly what they want it to be in their mind. And if the shot does not attain that, they're going to be there for a long time. Because they're going to keep shooting it.
Well, there's actually a quote that I had written down for that as far as Kubrick's ethic, and it was Sidney Pollack who had a comment on basically how he operated, and he said, Stanley couldn't understand why you spend all this time and money preparing and getting to the actual moment of filming and then rush through the filming.
Yeah.
He just felt that that was backwards. He spent 5 years preparing this picture. He spent months and months building the sets. Now it comes to this moment, he's going to do 60 to 70 tries. And I think that was the best argument for it that I had heard.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense when you put it in that perspective.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He had the keen awareness of the production aspect of it too, and that's why there was only one movie, I believe, Spartacus, where he was actually kind of involved with the typical Hollywood, producer.
Yep.
He wanted to have
Spartacus
that control.
barely feels like a Kubrick movie.
It does.
Yeah.
I didn't even know it was.
Yeah.
Honestly, though, it's kind of crazy that this took 5 years. Like it's a movie that doesn't look like it would.
Well, the movie it also took a entire year to shoot.
Oh, I know. That's
Like it's
crazy.
like that's a crazy long shoot.
Yep.
But yeah,
The tracking shots
so-
too. We talk about the axe scene, the most iconic scene. I mean, just the way that the camera moves back and gives you the energy of the axe swing.
I
anything
love
else
that.
you would just see kind of just a shot and have him hacking away. No,
That is
we
something-
are moving the momentum.
It's kinetic.
That's
Yeah.
something
Exactly.
that it has taken Hollywood so long to catch up on because they're finally starting to do that. This is so stupid, but the first movie that comes to mind when I think of this type of shooting where the camera is moving with the weapon or the fist or whatever it may be is Fast and the Furious. Furious 7 specifically. There's a moment, and that movie is directed by James Wan, where Hobbs and I want to say Shaw are fighting, and one throws the other into a glass table, and the camera pivots in a way following the movement, and it works so well because it adds this, I don't know, it to use the word again, this movement to the scene. It adds more
It's kinetic.
force,
Like,
Momentum.
to the, and this movie did it in 1980. Like that's just something like I don't think you'd see that in any other movie. That axe swing is so effective.
Even that first shot, we're going up the road to the mountains. I mean, just establishing the background of the mountains with the mist and the huge clouds, the ominousness of it. I mean, there's so many little things. Like they even mentioned early on, Wendy says, trail of breadcrumbs in the maze, and that's why we see the maze earlier on, setting that up. They mentioned the Donner Party, who are cannibals, and the trail of breadcrumbs from Hansel and Gretel, where there's cannibalism, like eating the witch eats the children or whatever it intends to. And there's so this is the level of detail which David can talk about later, because that inspires people to maybe look a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Where I'm of the opinion, a lot of things are Easter eggs for the Apollo 11 sweater. And referencing things, but there's also a timeless aspect of it that lives on even now, that it's not just a pop culture reference.
Right.
Yeah. But people like to make omelets out of Easter eggs, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
They
definitely do.
say Stanley Kubrick is an absolute genius. He knew what he was saying. If you look at this one thing and on this shelf or whatever, it means this. But in my opinion, it's just texture. Thematically. And so that's fully fleshing out the scene and the character of things, and alluding to things from the original story. Like, you've got Holocaust imagery, genocide of Native Americans, you've got alcoholism, duality of man, all those are human experience. So
I think every choice he makes here that wants people to, develop these conspiracy theories about the film, he does these things intentionally, but it's not because there's some like, oh, this is me trying to say this.
It's not
I think
a
it's
Da
more
Vinci
to
Code.
just it's more to make
I didn't mean
the
to get us on the conspiracy train too early. I know David's got a lot,
that's
so I
fine.
want to.
And I'm gonna take us off that
that.
path. I'm gonna take us off that path real quick. But it is more to get the audience to feel a certain way.
Yeah.
Like I think all of these things that are, as I mentioned earlier, inconsistencies. It's not a conspiracy. It is intentionally inconsistent. Like the Overlook Hotel.
It's unnerving.
The geography of it makes literally no sense. There's been people who are like, oh yeah, none of this makes sense. And there's certain scenes where chairs disappear from the background, or items disappear, like stickers on the wall disappear. David pointed this out to me, and I had never noticed it before.
Don't use my stuff until I get to it.
I'm giving you a little bit of credit.
It's subconsciously unnerving because you pick up on it without realizing. It's like, oh, that's off. But
yeah, it is. I think it is an intentional choice to disorient the audience, make them feel like they're in this place where rules aren't. It's not a logical place, and therefore you are kind of almost going a little insane with the characters.
Yeah. So
you are
what
trapped
goes
in the
along
maze
with
of
that,
the hotel.
Yeah. What goes along with that is kind of that thought that they have, or the where he's talking to Grady in that scene, and he's like, "You died."
The red bathroom,
etc. And the guy's like, well, or later he says, "You've always been here, though." So I kind of saw that stuff as a weird little bit of time shifting for him. So like time is not regular here. It's and you have that little bit at the end, but we won't mention that till later.
But the power of the bold color. Like that bright red bathroom, the green walls of that other bathroom, the blood of the elevator scene, and the silence of that behind it. Like those are the scenes that stick out in my mind. And honestly, personally leveling with you here, give me nightmares. Like, that totally stuff is what makes this a horror movie.
Yeah, and so let's get back to kind of plot points of the movie. I do want to talk about Jack Torrance. Jack Nicholson's performance here, I think he really starts to flourish in the middle point of this movie as he's slowly just losing it.
Descends to madness.
Yes, I love all the scenes of him, quote unquote, working on his writing, and just the scenes of where he's passing time, like throwing a tennis ball at the wall. Just you're thinking like, what is this guy doing? What's happening? And I think Jack Nicholson, this is where he like earns, like he deserves the credit. Where like this, no one else could play this role.
No,
this specific way that he's doing it. That's why he's on the cover of this movie. Just you can just picture his face. But
God,
this is where
that bouncing ball. That he's basically irreverently bouncing that on this mosaic Native American art, and then just kind of throws it off into the hallway, and that's the ball that gets rolled towards Danny before he goes to 237.
Yes. And the 237 scene, as you said, AJ, it haunts my nightmare, or haunts my dreams.
Too.
It's that is honestly, and it's not just because there's a naked woman. Yes, that's a big part of it, but it's just
that gives you nightmares.
It gives me nightmares, but he's going into this room that Dick had already said, like, don't go near 237. So they've planted this in your mind, like it's constantly there. Like, this is the room you do not go near. This is where the bad shine is, or whatever. And he goes in all the way to the bathtub, and it's I don't know, it's just terrifying. And when he gets up and close with this lady and looks in the mirror and sees that it's this decaying, old, decrepit.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up mirrors. Mirrors are everywhere too. That was one thing I wanted to talk about. The
mirrors
cinematography. And actually, when he's going down the hallway, when he has those manic fits, it's literally when he's passing the mirrors.
Yeah.
I think the single best mirror shot in this, though, is when Danny walks in, kind of quietly opening and closing the door
to get his fire truck,
and sees that his dad is on the bed, and he's like, "Oh, too late. He sees me, I guess." And then it cuts to a behind the back shot of Jack, and you see his expression in the mirror, and then Danny confronting, looking at him as he's speaking with him. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, that is an impressive shot. Just like giving me all the information that I need and doing it in a tasteful way. I was very impressed.
But you're talking about Jack Nicholson's, like that scene specifically too. And he's wearing a blue robe there. So he's got that. Is this actually Jack, the human, as a caring father, like saying he would never hurt his son? He actually cares about him. He wants him to be happy. But then he brings up his other things, and that guy, the monster in the mirror, like when he says you would never hurt mommy or daddy or mommy or me, right? He doesn't say no right away. He says, why would you say that?
Pauses.
He's like,
so
who
that's kind of thing.
told you?
Like first, as a dad, you would say, no, I would never hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
What gives you that idea? Not, what do you mean? Like that's kind of eerie. And then he goes off on, how his mother put that idea in his head. And then the scene at the bar where we see one part of him struggling, I would never actually hurt him. But then he turns into the monster, literally trying to rationalize the monster of why he hurt him and all this stuff. And then it was all Wendy's fault. And the duality of it and the reflection in the mirrors is so present. And it's intentional for sure.
I think that going back to as far as symbolism of the colors and everything, it's interesting to note that when they first come to the hotel, you don't see any of these outrageous colors. The only thing you see is the big kind of ballroom. But it isn't until they're alone in the hotel that all these colors start coming to life. Mm-hmm. And it really does remind me of Dick Halloran's speech to Danny, where he says, like, don't go in room 237. There's nothing in there. But then also saying there's no reason for you to be in there. And I think, like, the way I interpret that meaning is that you kind of give credence to your fears by indulging them. Like whatever is plaguing this family kind of breathes life into the hotel. And that's just like, it's really fascinating to think of it that way.
Notably, the color palette in that room is so in contrast with the rest of the hotel. Mm-hmm. And also important, because I talked about red and blue, Jack is actually wearing a red jacket and blue when he goes full axe murderer. So that kind of contradicts what we're saying about red and blue being the more human or whatever. But Jack actually says when he gets, when the waiter and the whatever thing like spills the stuff on him before Grady. Right. He says, well, I'm about to shed this jacket anyway. So he's shedding this exterior and fully going into the mania.
Yeah. See, those are intentional lines that I believe.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like I believe that's not some weird thing that someone looked into and was like, oh, this is what he mean. Like that seems like a Kubrick actually saying something.
Yeah.
So let's, I feel throughout this point, I feel so sorry for Wendy because Danny and you did. I know you, Irina, were like, this is like the worst. But Danny's starting to go crazy. Like Tony is taking.
You mean Jack?
No, Danny.
Danny's crazy?
No. It's more like Danny is from Wendy's perspective.
Oh. Yeah. Tony is taking over Danny's body pretty much, and he's speaking with his finger a lot and being like,
Danny's gone.
all that stuff. and on the other end, Jack is down there. Yeah, and on the other end, Jack is spiraling out of control. So she's really between a rock and a hard place, and they're stuck here at this remote hotel. What do we think of Wendy throughout this point? Like, I thought this is how I would be acting. Like guys, come on, let's stop this.
Like everyone's falling around.
Come on.
Well, and something that we didn't really talk about that fits with this is her experience with Jack after seeing Danny walk out with bruises on his neck and his
that scene
arm,
was chilling too.
Which is a very big scene because she's kind of on Jack's side up until that exact moment.
Well, he just had this huge nightmare.
Yeah. As a father, you would, or a mother, I mean, you see that in your kid. You're like, there's only 3 people in this house. Mm-hmm. They're in this room. And you, the viewer, have to go, okay, so we know that Danny had an experience with room 237 right beforehand. We don't see what happens. It kind of leads you to believe that he had an experience with that room and it hurt him. Mm-hmm. And then the other side, we're led to believe that Jack did it, showing through the eyes of Wendy.
Well, did it... there's that scene where he's like, I would never hurt you.
So, this
essentially, could it have, like, cut
So you're asking, are the ghosts real, or is it all Jack?
Don't witness it?
Not only if the ghosts are real or if it's all Jack, it's more like if the ghosts can actually hurt you. And that's something that Halloran says in the beginning is that they're not real, they're pictures. They can't hurt you. Yeah. So if that is true, let's say that is the true fact of this movie is that the ghosts can't hurt you. Who did hurt Danny then?
It would have to be
It'd
Jack.
have to be Jack.
Yeah.
Well, who let
And
Jack
so-
out of the locked pantry?
There's a conspiracy theory about that.
Well, he didn't get that injury. He had that injury before the locked pantry.
No, I know. What I'm saying is Danny had an experience where he was hurt, and then that's when Wendy hears Jack screaming simultaneously, and then she sees Danny walk in with the bruises. But I think what it leads you to believe is that before Jack fell asleep, he abused Danny, then went back, and that's when Danny walks in.
The interesting thing about this is that I love that this movie could take a standpoint of, well, just everyone, like, this is just Jack crazy. There's actually no supernatural thing. But, you know, there is. However, I kind of like that approach in certain movies. It
leaves
allows,
you guessing.
Yeah, it leaves you guessing whether, oh, this person's just really crazy, or, it's the house.
And boy, does this movie leave you guessing.
The ambiguity isn't intentional, and we talked about this for Blade Runner.
Yeah.
And I think Kubrick took the right approach. That ambiguity, Kubrick is wanting to ask the questions and let you discuss it, not tell you what the theme is or what to walk away with. Yeah.
I mean, in the book, it's very clear-cut what it is, but for this, I like the idea that he's just completely... he's insane in both ones, but the fact that you're guessing between the two is great.
So before we close out the story with our final story portion, let's talk about the big scene, the infamous one that took 114 takes, something like that. The axe scene.
Wait, that's
not the axe.
That's
scene.
next.
No, I think we got there
I
because she
thought you
hits
were
him.
talking
And
about
it's
Wendy with the
next.
baseball bat.
yeah,
That's
what
yeah.
I mean. That's
He
what I
just
mean.
he just
Sorry,
got knocked
I didn't mean
out.
the axe. Let's talk about the staircase scene where Jack is reprimanding in a very threatening way to Wendy, implying that he is going to, correct her maybe.
Or bash her head in, as he said.
not gonna hurt her.
Exactly. Yeah, this scene, again, 114 takes. Do you think they got the best take?
I think they needed a couple more, actually. Poor Shelley Duvall.
This scene is so good because it is the performance from Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall. This is them. I do think this is the best of both of them. Granted, I have not seen the other takes, but for one, Jack Nicholson is consistent with the character that you saw with him being in the beginning. Mm-hmm. He's a little, sarcastic and insulting, but it's turned up to 11 now.
He changes his tune so many times.
And it's bordering on just threatening.
Yet at the same time,
Psychotic.
it almost seems like this is the first time they're actually truly speaking to each other on on the level with each other, whereas before there's this gulf between them, like completely different pages.
The veneer is gone. Like it's completely exposed now. Mm-hmm. And Shelley Duvall, she looks completely traumatized, scared out of her mind. She makes a good swing at him. He falls down the staircase.
Arguable to say that she's not actually acting in this scene.
I really like the kind of half-hearted swings at him she makes. Like, it's almost a shout out to be like, no, I don't want to hit you, but I'm showing that, I kind of might hit you if you keep doing this. Like, she doesn't, when she's swinging at him the first few times, you get that she does not actually want to hit him.
Yeah.
It goes back to the rationalization of Jack's violence, especially with this, alcoholism and injuring Danny in the past. They all rationalize it. They have this, kind of same story that they say of, oh, it's just an accident, a few extra pounds of pressure, extra strength, it just happens. Like, she's rationalizing like that. It's almost like, it's gaslighting. He's gaslighted her. And so there's that abuse aspect of it. And now, like, it's the victim. Like, you're truly a victim. Like, how do you respond as a victim?
Her way of handling this scene is so visceral. It actually made me think of a movie that I absolutely hate, Hereditary. I get hints of was it Toni Collette? Yeah. Very, like, real emotions, terror. So if there's one thing good about Hereditary, it's that. But this scene is one of my favorite in horror, I think, ever. And I think it's untopped.
It's a really good example of showing that man can be just as scary as anything supernatural.
Yeah.
Like I know he is like kind of possessed by this house, but like I am terrified of Jack in this scene. Like I don't know. Like I want to curl up into a little ball when I'm watching it. It's Kubrick knew how to set up a scene for ultimate tension, ultimate, just like get me the hell out of here.
You just want Wendy to run at this point. And the slow backing up, you're like, just go.
That's
the music.
something.
Yeah, the music is unnerving.
Something interesting about this film, though, is apart from Scat Man Crothers, like no one really ever fully feels the wrath of Jack in this, or like any physical harm, I should say.
Yeah.
Maybe Danny. I don't know what the hell happened with his neck, but he at almost every turn he is thwarted. Like it's even in the end, like Danny outsmarts him, and he's just I'm just gonna sit down and freeze to death. But that's just something else that's kind of fun. I guess that's it for this section. So Noah, do you want to continue the story or finish the story?
Jack chases Danny and Wendy into a bathroom where Danny escapes out the window as Jack begins to bash the door down with the axe. Here's Johnny! Jack breaks through the door, Wendy attacks him with a knife and escapes, searching for Danny. Dick arrives and is killed by Jack, who then follows Danny into the hedge maze, where Danny tricks him using false footprint paths. Fortunately for Wendy and Danny, Dick brought a snowcat. They depart, leaving Jack to freeze to death in the cold. It is then shown in a photograph in the hallway. Jack is pictured standing in the middle of a crowd at a party on July 4th, 1921.
100 years ago, exactly.
From now,
Yeah, which
Isn't
is
that
funny.
cool?
So we picked the perfect time to talk about this, or you picked.
I
the
did.
perfect
I
time to
didn't
talk.
even try to.
Convenient. Yeah.
That
That's
was
so
weird.
crazy that that's the century mark.
It's the hotel.
All right, complete chaos in this final moment. We get the iconic red rum scene.
Gosh, I would hate to wake up to that. I would punch him.
How did Danny do this voice? Like I want it's just so weirdly perfect for this. Mm-hmm. Like it sounds like a kid, but it also sounds like kind of disembodied.
We all have
almost.
our talents, man. Like this kid just had a talent.
I'm
So-
just
Yours is
impressed.
that Elmo voice you do.
Can you guys elaborate on who Tony is? Is that just his shine?
It's a little boy that
Yeah.
lives in his mouth.
So the movie version is very different from the book version. And I don't know if you want the book version explanation.
Book version is kind of what I was looking for.
Oh, okay.
But movie version will do too.
So for any listeners that want to read the book and haven't, maybe skip ahead a little bit because it's like one of those things where it's more fun to learn about than anything.
Spoilers
But one of the
in 3, 2, 1.
So in the book, one line that particularly stuck out to me when I was reading it was that the parents were very aware of the of Tony, the best friend, and that, or the imaginary best friend that Danny has, and Danny's middle name is Anthony.
Oh.
So Tony came from a nickname of his middle name.
Huh.
So the shine, it's almost like he turned it into some other person in order for him to digest it properly.
As a child.
So, like, as a kid, during the process of the book, his first relationship with Tony is that of a imaginary best friend. But then as the plot progresses in the hotel, he starts to fear Tony, thinking it's something evil. And then afterwards, looking to it as a source of strength because it's actually coming from himself. So it's basically a kid trying to understand something that is bigger than they're able to really wrap their head around. So it's, I would basically like pare that down to its intuition, and he just kind of put a name to it.
Okay.
Coping mechanism.
Interesting.
Exactly.
It's kind of funny that they make the choice then to make Tony such a weirdly demonic
Yeah, and I
kind
think
of
it works for this.
Yeah,
and,
like it's more
yeah.
unsettling the way, even though it is not necessarily a sinister,
Yeah.
thing. But they kind of make it seem like it's an evil.
Yeah.
I think that is ultimately a smart choice though, because it adds to how unsettling this movie is.
And
but-
it still is kind of accurate because there is a moment where, Tony says, Danny isn't here, Mrs. Torrance. And it is, like you said, AJ, a coping mechanism where what is happening is too much for Danny to deal with. So his other personality essentially is coming forward and taking over.
So he has to he's hiding inside of himself.
Yeah. So they swapped spots where Tony was hiding in his stomach. Now Danny is hidden inside.
So in the book, does Jack have the Shining as well?
No, he doesn't. I think it's just...
I think the house is
It's just
shining, or
Danny.
the overlook is shining on him,
Yes.
possessing
Yeah,
him.
so
Correct.
he's...
Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
It's like a possession.
And so something they don't do in the movie, which is actually referenced though, this scene was shot, but Kubrick took it out, was Jack finding this book that has a bunch of clips from newspapers and stuff and pictures going over the history of the Overlook. And that essentially him accepting that was he was going to use it for information as far as writing his book. So he was using it for inspiration. And that act in the book was what essentially sold his soul to the hotel itself. And he started being corrupted after that because he accepted that offering from the hotel. In the movie, I think it's more interpreted as him indulging or imbibing in the drink was almost like the ultimate conversion.
I never thought about the comparison on that.
Well, because he said I would give my goddamn soul, just for a beer. And so then after that, that's when Lloyd appears,
He's back on
Ready
the
to
level.
take it.
Yeah.
I do remember that scene in the book too, because not a scene. There's actually many scenes where he's kind of the word comes to mind is fawning, but it's not even the right word. It's he is constantly going to the boiler room to read this thing,
Right.
and gets more and more engrossed in it to the point where that's kind of what takes him over. Irina said, but it was so big in my mind. That's one of the top 3 things I remember from the book.
Wow.
Also, a scene that never made it, which was Danny in outside in the snow.
So what? Before we get to the movie more or the scenes, what's your book rating overall? How close is it? What's the out of 10? Let's hear it.
4
out of 10.
I'm honestly, I'll still stick with 5 because I think there is something about the elements that is still alive in the movie, but it's just the shift of personal
almost.
storytelling is different.
Okay.
So I would still go with half.
All right, so we'll talk about this big scene. We already talked about the axe swinging, but that was more from a cinematography standpoint. This is probably the most horrific, or I don't know. Is it the most horrific? I don't think it is. The bathroom scene still kind of ranks up at the top. But this is the most where
we talked about how particular Kubrick is about, the scene. It was so scary. One shot, we have the toilet paper placed the right way. The next shot, we have the toilet paper placed the wrong way.
Yeah, so weird. Even in these
That was
moments, he
horrific.
does that.
I kind of love the idea of them shooting a scene and then they're about to shoot the next and he's like, wait a minute. And he runs over and swaps the toilet paper and then runs back and he's like, okay, go.
Yeah,
It's no one puts
completely
their toilet
psychotic
paper
to
like
put
that.
your toilet paper that way.
Yeah.
yeah. But this scene when he is breaking down the door in the bathroom, the sign of a really good horror movie is you still don't feel like she's safe, even though you've seen this movie before.
Yeah.
You're still like, oh, get out of there, get out of there.
Yeah.
If a movie is effective, it gets you to relive or at least kind of erase your thoughts about how the movie concludes, and you're just in it in that moment. And this is one of those scenes where I'm like, oh man, she might not make it out of here. Even though I've seen this movie, as I said, 10 plus times, I'm still very anxious.
Worried.
It might be worth it to say that when I was reading an interview, or it was more like Diane Johnson was writing her own kind of perspective or like addition to the mind behind Kubrick, and she was describing their writing process, and she said that he was very, very interested in wanting to make like something that was really horrific, like the most horrific thing that has ever been made. And one of his ways of doing that was he was like diving in deep to what Freud had to say about fear. And so like looking into all those elements, like eyes are scary and all these sorts of elements that create fear in us. And for scenes like this where you still feel that tension, I think it's because of that kind of research.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of how people react to spiders. Like even if you know it's not a spider that can harm you, there's just a fear that you have still about it.
It has to be one of the main reasons why I think this movie is timeless.
Yeah.
Because it capitalizes on like primal human fears.
Mm-hmm.
Like fears that have existed for millennia.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
where it's like, what is unsettling?
It's tapping into something that's biological.
Yeah. It's not giving
You,
in.
like literally, like and it's so off balance. Like the biological aspect of it, like the bathroom scene, Jack embracing the naked lady and then switch to the hag.
Yeah.
The dichotomy, putting you off balance, like it's hooked biologically. I mean, if that's not Freudian, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
And there's that also subtlety of it where from Jack's perspective, it's one version of this lady. From Danny's perspective, she has short hair. So then it's like, is that are those the twins like at a later age? All those things that are layered. It's the multi-layered aspect of it that kind of makes it stick with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I actually have to give credit to my wife, Amber. She pointed this out in the movie that the Overlook is a maze. There is a literal maze outside of the Overlook.
Yep.
And the road to get to the Overlook is pretty much a landlocked maze as well. Adding to just how unsettling this movie is. What is more unsettling than being within 3 mazes, pretty much like
So
a mental
isolated,
maze,
with no outside
Leprosy
contact.
hags.
Yep.
yeah, a mental maze, a transportation maze, and a physical like walking maze. Like there's so much like where you're just diving deeper, walking deeper into this area that the only way you can get out is by backtracking your steps. And which I think is oddly symbolic when Disney. Why did I say Disney? When Danny actually starts to step back, I do think that there is a parallel between Jack and Danny, whereas Danny, I think they're trying to show that they are both kind of controlled by this shine, but Danny is able to walk himself out of it, while Jack decides to just plunge even deeper, and thus that results in his death. The only way to get out of
at some point, I almost got like Danny's shine was trying to like save Jack or protect him, and that goes into some time travel stuff too. But that's a little too much of a maze, I guess.
Yeah, but I think Kubrick was very conscious on just putting you in this situation where it is just a situation where no human would want to be in, where literally everything about it is just disorienting. Like every shot is just like, hey, that's a bit off. And we're also in a maze. Like it's just the movie is so well calculated in that respect. And anyone that thinks that these are mistakes that he's made, like these inconsistencies that you see, no, it was not. It's all Kubrick playing with your mind, man.
Some people think even more so.
Yeah. No, they think too much. And that we will close with that, David. Don't worry. You'll be our grand finale. So let's actually talk about that final moment in the maze. Wendy's able to cut Jack's hand, get out of there, and he is and then we kind of cut to Danny making his way through the maze, and Jack is following him. Meanwhile, Wendy's trying to get the snow cat going. This is a scene where I feel like it doesn't milk it as much as it could have. Like, it ends relatively quickly, this finale. Any other movie, this maze scene would last for 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. It'd be some really long, drawn-out thing, but I feel like it's over and done with relatively quickly. And I kind of like that, because it's like we've been... Like, my heart rate has been up this entire thing. Like, I don't need another protracted sequence of... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just... I don't need another protracted sequence of, being worried about how this is going to end. But
it's because this is juxtaposed against Dick's race to get back to the Overlook, and it's abruptly ended. And then so we have the opposite of all that tension that's just kind of unrelieved of him trying to like get all these connections to get back to the Overlook to try to save them. And obviously we have a big departure from the book there. Like, Dick is literally just killed right away.
Yeah. I don't know why I completely glazed over that. But yeah, we should talk about, Dick making really communicating with Danny using the shine almost, and then making his way over to the Overlook. And yeah, you're right. This was a big change from the book. This was something, even though I had not read the book, I knew this was like
a deviation.
Yeah, a deviation. That's maybe the one thing I knew was different.
I think because Mom told you directly.
Probably.
Like she was. I think during the movie she's like, "Oh yeah, this didn't happen in the book," and then she showed us the mini series that Stephen King had made.
Yeah. I understand why Stanley Kubrick made this decision, killing off Dick. It's the one opportunity where Jack fully goes into the irredeemable, category where, like, he was already irredeemable, but this was like, oh, he actually killed the guy, and now the stakes are raised. Like, he literally swung an axe right into his chest, and man, that scene gets me every time, where he's walking down the hallway. And I've seen this movie a million times. I know he's going to come out from behind the pillar and swing that axe into his chest, but it is never not surprising.
Yeah.
That's what makes it the horror. It's the dashing of the hope.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But then you realize, oh yeah, the hope's still there because now they have transportation out of here.
It was a sacrifice.
Yeah, exactly. I wish he... okay, I'll say something that I think this movie could have done better. And I think there's a couple of things this movie could have done better. I think they could have given Wendy maybe just a little bit more to do. Develop her character a little bit more.
Definitely.
In the book, I've heard she's more resourceful. I mean, it does show her, operating things in this movie. Or kind of keeping the place, alive or running. But I kind of don't like how she just kind of shrivels up in every scene.
Yeah.
Like,
she's shriveling, but she's also doing something that is actually surprisingly helpful, but you do get the sense that she's sort of just a weak character.
Yeah. Well, in those clutch moments, she delivers.
Yeah.
But they don't do any build up to like why she would be able to do that.
Right.
I'm
she hits him in the head.
I'm just saying, like, along those lines, I'm conflicted personally about the bathroom scene where, he goes, "Here's Johnny," and she screams, and then she's kind of just fumbling this knife, and because she didn't get out the window. Like, that's where I was kind of frustrated with her. Like, I feel like, well, maybe she could have fit out that window, but also just kind of I don't know, how she fumbled with a knife kind of just felt inept to me. I don't know. What did you guys feel about that?
No, I totally agree. But again, this goes back to, this was Kubrick's idea. Like, he wanted her to be just a flimsy, kind of, weak character who is, you feel the terror.
Well, she's like, you can almost say that she's been, if you're buying into the sort of abusive father role, she's been enabling him because like this whole time she's been running the hotel, kind of in the boiler room, keeping things going. He is the one that feels a connection with the hotel, and all he's doing is, sitting in that room writing a novel. So she's supporting him. She's being the caretaker technically, but he's getting all the glory quote unquote glory for being the caretaker in his grand speech that he gives to her. There's so many times where she, instead of confronting him, just kind of acts like everything is fine. even though he blew up at her,
Yeah.
she immediately kind of takes the role of docile and going like, he's absolutely right. I should stay out of his business and let him just do what he's doing.
And Danny is the
she'll
one
take
that
care
gets
of
hurt
the
because
son.
of all of it.
Exactly. So she's like, in some ways, she's just as much.
Part of the machine.
Well, I don't want to say she's just as much to blame, but she is also part of the issue.
Yeah.
So like all of this acting where she's not directly hurting him still is like fighting with that kind of, this is the stronger male role and I'm more submissive. Like she's kind of battling with that, you know?
Well, and she's the abused
interesting.
in this situation. I mean,
Yeah.
she's constantly trying to fight out of this abused role,
Right.
which is different than I feel like some characters could be. It is weird because she's very docile, very weak feeling, but she never stops.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it more of a real character,
Well,
something that you can sort of root for.
In the beginning, I think like the only thing that is going to sway her is the fact that Danny is involved. If Danny weren't here, like who knows what would have happened. But like in the very beginning, she's reading a book called Catcher in the Rye, which is, you know, everyone knows it's about like the wanting to protect the innocent in a way. Like the main character is constantly wanting to look out for younger children. So it's just kind of like adding to her character of like Danny is her only source of inspiration, really.
Wow.
Sorry.
No, it's
Do you think that perhaps Stanley Kubrick was trying to have her be a character that at first was really flimsy and weak and very submissive and all of this, and then eventually grow into a strong character
It
at
might
the
have
end,
been, but
and couldn't
yeah.
do that, and that's why he didn't. Like with her, she
Yeah.
wanted clear direction, and he wanted her to kind of
I do
take
feel
the
like
reins on that.
that's part of the problem. Like as like we were mentioning in the beginning, going back to their difference of opinion
Yeah.
on how to run a scene.
yeah.
Because I could absolutely see that side of things, wanting to take the
Right.
story that direction, because then it becomes less of a, oh, she's just a flimsy character. I want her to be weak the whole time, and more of a, I want this character to overcome her fear of, you know, him, or,
Right.
you know, always being ruled by whatever the abusive man is.
Right.
You know?
So my other minor flaw with this is I wish that Scat Man or Dick Halloran, once he got to the Overlook, had a little more time before just completely getting offed.
Yeah, he's just a vehicle.
Yeah.
Literally.
I would have liked to see more, like maybe even meet up with Danny outside
Yeah.
and just like, hey, here's what you got to do. And this is him. Maybe impart some more wisdom about the shine or whatever, knowing that he's going to die, or at least face some insurmountable
Yes.
odds. Like I want to see, you know, Dick kind of preparing for battle, kind of knowing that this could be the end.
Yes.
We'll see. Like
I
'cause
agree.
I think that would be consistent with like he knows there's evil in this Overlook. Like really play into that more.
Yeah.
He kind of just goes in there hesitantly, like, hey, what's going on?
Or
and then just
heighten the terror when he realizes that he is actually afraid of you know,
Yeah.
what's in 237 versus, oh, it's just whatever, burnt toast.
yeah. And I know at this point Danny is still hidden somewhere in there. He hasn't quite made it outside, at least I don't think, right?
At this point,
Yeah, or is he outside?
He's
Danny
hiding in
is,
the kitchen thing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
yeah.
because he screams once Halloran is hit with the
Yeah.
axe.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, my timeline of this is messed up a little bit.
I think that's the point.
Yeah, but yeah, I could have used just a little more from him and a little more from Wendy. Mm-hmm. But other than that, like, I can't really complain.
In the end, it's all personal preference, it seems like, because this is all so intentional and
Yeah.
done exactly the way Kubrick wanted. So either you're 100% on board or you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You,
so-
you could have had a really neat scene where if they wanted to play out the same way where Danny is still stuck in the kitchen and witnessing this, you could have had a cool scene where Dick is actually talking to Jack for a moment before he gets killed.
Exactly.
And it's kind of and it ends up being a lesson for Danny. So he kind of
That he
talks about like this can go really wrong if you let it get to you, etc., etc. It would be like a veiled lesson for
And actually, I think that would
Danny.
help, and not to
before he's killed.
I think that would help Dr. Sleep. There's certain things
exactly.
in Dr. Sleep that are picked up on about his relationship with Dick.
Yeah.
That you would have been better seated, or would have made more sense if they were seated in The Shining.
Yes.
But that's neither here nor there.
That's for next time.
I can't complain about it too much. It's just these are little minor things. Like I had to say something about it. Any final thoughts on the final maze sequence and the photograph at the end? Did y'all want to say anything about that before we get into conspiracies?
I think through all my watchings of this movie, I think it's interesting to kind of come back to it each time as you get older, and definitely now, since from the mindset of analyzing films and having gone through college where we were analyzing books and movies and trying to, discern what the deeper meaning is, it's funny to see how, like, as a kid or, adolescent growing up, I never actually really thought about thinking about this movie too deeply.
I never thought about thinking about it.
I never thought about thinking about it. The only scene, though, where it always perplexed me was that final photo. Mm-hmm. And I just would sit there going like, so how?
I am not convinced that photo is actually real. I almost think that photo is zoomed in on as Jack's fantasy is being kind of played out, or his ghostly presence in Overlook is like his imaginings of I don't know, like
he's dead though,
his sense of belonging.
I don't know what to make of it.
Or maybe it's kind of a, it's not actually 1921 because clearly that other guy was there and died, and that wasn't Grady, and that wasn't 1921 supposedly. But
and what's Grady's real
first name? It could just be a showing of all of the victims, and it happens to say 1921.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, I believe it has more to do with the fact that there is the spirit of the hotel that possesses the caretakers or anyone that happens to fall victim to it. And the one that he was sort of possessed by was, I think, a real person. Now that picture is his, but I think that it's not Jack in that picture, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
He was always there.
It's the caretaker.
Well, it's kind of like every caretaker finds themselves in this one demonic situation where they're like, they're all that one person.
Yep.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
All right. So that is the end of the story, but we're going to have a quick little conspiracy corner.
Conspiracy session.
No, I don't think there's any. Well, there might be a few, but there are few. This is one of the movies that has so many weird theories associated with it. A lot of them completely bonkers and ridiculous. And David, you've kind of went down the rabbit hole. Went down the rabbit hole here. And came out on the other side completely mad. But first, explain the bear, and then give me your top 3 theories in terms of maybe one. Give me one maybe you actually think has validity to it, one that's completely bonkers, and another one that's just do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah. So the first theory is called the... I don't know if it's called the bear theory, but I call it the bear theory. There's also the Wendy theory. There is Kubrick's secret messages with 237 and how he uses that throughout the movie. And many, many others that, if you want to get into, what was it? Abbey Road and the Beatles.
We don't want to go there.
We're just gonna briefly touch on a little bit of these, but the bear theory is the
big 3.
Is the one that I think I would subscribe to the most based on the facts. So, let's start with the Wendy theory.
You're just trolling me. I just want to hear about the bear.
We're gonna get the bear last.
I think the Wendy theory is interesting.
It is. The Wendy theory is basically formed around Wendy, and the fact that she is actually more of a schizophrenic, that she has a mental disorder. And anytime that you see her in this film with things that go missing is when she's having a lapse of memory. So like there's a scene where she's talking to Jack. Let's use that as the main scene to sort of justify this theory, right?
Okay.
So she walks in, he's writing his novel, and he snaps at her, tells her to get the F out. That's the scene. While she's talking to him about this, you see the chair there, you see it disappear, and then it comes back again. And he crumples up a piece of paper that he's writing, and then she walks away when he tells her to leave. And then it cuts back to Jack, and he has paper back in his typewriter, and he doesn't look angry like he did before. His hair isn't disheveled like it was before. It's normal, and it's the same paper where it was, and he looks more confused than angry, which you would think that's a little weird considering what just happened. Now the theory is that she is crazy, and all of that situation, the back and forth, was in her own head. She walks up and then had that whole thing play out in her head, and then she just walks away. And then Jack is just sitting there like, well, that was weird. And he goes back to typing on his typewriter. That's sort of that's the theory. And then there's so many scenes where things go missing while she's in the scene that is her not remembering her surroundings.
And also, so to substantiate that a little bit, like early on when we first see Wendy and Danny, their house, like there are books and books and books everywhere when she's reading The Catcher in the Rye. She's got this nervous tick with the smoking, the agitation. She's got this shake and tremble. And what else? Even Jack says early on, like, she'll love it, the story about the murder, because she's so into, ghost stories and horror movies.
Yeah, there is something with The Catcher in the Rye here as well, that people with mental disorders tend to want to read that more. I didn't look into that more, but I had heard that. So that's part of that. So that's the Wendy theory, everybody. Wendy is psychotic. Nothing crazy is going down. Jack's fine. The hotel's not evil. She just has a mental lapse.
I don't believe it, but it's interesting.
That's my thoughts exactly.
Yeah.
So the next one is the 237. So that's the room number. And people seem to think that Kubrick is a demigod among men. Not just an amazing filmmaker, not just the greatest director of all time, but an overall super genius that knows how to formulate time, seconds, plotting every single movement down to the millisecond.
Of course.
And let's just pretend that that's true, right? And a lot of that is based on what's happening at these moments that are correlating to 2, 3, and 7. And a lot of the theories, like, it's not even just 2, 3, 7 in that order. It could be 3, 2, 7. It could be 7, 2, 3. It could be 7.
How you
2,
add
3,
the numbers
2.
together.
It's stupid. It gets ridiculous. But how, if you look at 2 minutes and 37 seconds, they're in the office of this person. If you look at what's happening on the wall, correlate that to 2 hours and 37 seconds. And if you look at when Jack's in the room with in 237, he's in that room for exactly 2 minutes and 37 seconds. Whoa. Now maybe that scene
Play it
was
backwards
intentional.
and forwards at the same time.
Okay. It's stupid. So that I'm not even going to delve into that. You can look into the 237 conspiracy.
Like, if that is true, it seems
Okay,
like
so
something he
what's
did
the
for
point
fun.
of using 237? What's the message that he's trying to say?
I don't know, man.
What is the conspiracy? That those are all like clues that point to the fact that he filmed the fake moon landing, and so he's secretly
It all
confessing
comes
that.
back to the moon landing, and people really want Kubrick to be the guy who did it. And that's not even like the main thing I'm going to get to, the one that I subscribe to the most. But I mean, we all know that Danny's wearing his Apollo shirt, his sweater, and a lot of people think that is basically Kubrick outing himself as, or putting homage to the fact that he faked the moon landing for the government.
Even the hexagon pattern on the carpet.
Yeah, there's so many things where they make connections to him working for NASA. It's crazy. But let's just jump into the last one so we're not beleaguering too much. It is the bear theory. The one that I think holds the most credence, even though it's kind of crazy. So you guys remember at the end with the man and the bear in the room that Wendy walks in on for some weird reason.
Zooms in on the bear mask.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So that all connects to a larger theme because people are like, well, why did he put that in there? And so people went back and sort of broke down almost too much every scene that involves a bear. And it starts with Danny when he is at home in the very beginning. He's laying on top of a bear cushion. You can see it enveloping him. And
there's a bear in the writing room as well where
there is. And Wendy walks across it many times, runs across it. And I think there's something about like the timing with 237 with it, but I'm going to ignore that for this because it doesn't matter. But there's also a point where he's being looked at by the doctor while he's on the bear, where he's pantsless, he's covering his crotch and in a very vulnerable position. Then I think the whole conspiracy theory is that he was sexually molested by his father, Jack, and that there's so many hints to him being a lustful person in this movie, looking at other females, obviously the infamous 237 room scene. But in the end, I think the whole bear in the room with that man, and the bear costume has like the butt open, is her walking in on Danny and Jack together doing something. And him making Danny do something. And
that's disturbing.
And
so the neck scene.
Yeah.
That's very disturbing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's
If
also,
that's true.
not only that, there's actually multiple pictures. I forgot about this. There's multiple pictures of bears in rooms with Danny specifically.
I just got chills thinking about that. If that theory is true.
And,
like, I don't know.
And the scene where Danny is in the room with his father, the one that he had the mirror scene where he walks in to get his toy, it becomes so much more uncomfortable.
Yeah, I know. And that makes more sense with Danny being so quiet
He
about
does
opening
not
the
want to
door.
be there.
Like
Not only that, him hiding from his dad. Well, clearly he's got an axe, so he would be hiding. But it changes that whole chase scene to it being about kind of protecting Danny from another episode, and Daddy's gonna, kill everyone, kind of cover it up. Or
And Dad, I would never hurt you.
yeah,
Like, I'm not
Never.
saying that's true, but
Yeah.
you're right. That out of the three, that is the most. That seems like
Like,
the
you
most.
could follow
I
the
can
most.
see it.
It
I
makes
think
sense
it's
with
like-
the story.
Yeah.
There's no one to confirm that was the underlying message, but I think that throughout the film there is definitely, and this kind of in my mind goes back to Freud again, there is sex everywhere. It's not obvious, but it's kind of like in a lot of the details just here and there. Like in Halloran's home, he has like these pinup girls in his bedroom. And then, like, in the boiler room, you have a bunch of pinup girls on the wall.
In the
Then,
green room, the green bathroom, obviously.
Jack's character is reading a Playgirl magazine in the very
to
beginning.
bring that up.
And so it's like they're just kind of scattered or peppered all over the place. And I think there's like that. I think in my mind, it goes back to like this kind of stigma of sex, and there's almost this fear about it in the psyche, and it kind of just makes you uncomfortable having it out in the open in a public setting. So it's I think it just, going back to the word texture that AJ provided, it's texture.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
so
just commentary on, the kind of gritty, dark side of humanity, the duality of it. And wasn't that bear scene in the book?
Yeah, it was in the book, 100%.
Wow.
Okay, but one of the biggest things that I totally forgot to use as substantiation was the fact that in the beginning, Jack is reading a Playgirl magazine, or Playboy? Yeah,
It was a
Playgirl.
Playgirl.
Yeah, reading Playgirl while he's just in the open. And then people have looked up that specific issue, and on the cover, one of the big stories that it's talked about on the front is family incest. Yes. So when I found that, I was like, okay, Kubrick would not put in a Playgirl magazine with that. That just seems so out there. That is not an accident.
I missed all of that.
Well, you don't see it. It's just like in the background. Like, it's so subtle, you don't pick up on it unless you pause it, then take the picture, look up that model of the magazine. It's
that
crazy.
issue. You
That
mean?
issue, yes.
Yeah. Wow. That's. Oh, I don't like that.
Well, then some people even go into like, he's going to get the fire truck, which has the letter F ending in K, which, what's the other English word that uses those letters.
Frick?
Yeah, basically.
Oh,
So,
man, that's
like I said, I think it's people making an omelet out of Easter eggs, and
Yeah.
Kubrick, in my personal opinion, is just adding all this texture into things. And, yes, there's thematic things to comment on that's just dark about humanity, and this movie is darkness. But I think Stanley Kubrick himself even said, they're going crazy about looking too deep into things. It's a ghost story.
Yeah.
And of course,
And-
that's
and
what he
reading-
would say if he's trying to cover up a moon landing. But
I really wish we had more from Kubrick on this. I mean, I'm going to spend as little time on this one as possible, but there is enough.
Yeah.
The last
Go
one
ahead, sorry.
is a conspiracy that if you play this movie forwards and then there's a way of overlaying the movie in reverse, playing simultaneously, superimposed, and if you play them at the same time while listening to the final album by the Beatles, there is a deeper, darker message behind the whole thing. And I think it's dumb horse shit. So if you want to learn more about that, you can
Not
watch a
bullshit.
whole 2.5 hour documentary on it on YouTube.
Hey, give me a one-word description of what that is. What is the message?
Genius.
well, see, that's the thing. It's
Kubrick's
so
a genius.
It's selection bias. People already have a preconceived notion of what the message they want, and then they cherry pick
Yeah.
things that support their theory because he's got so much detail everywhere.
Right.
Like you can pick up on details for everything and make out whatever
Yeah.
you want.
So going back to commenting on your comment, I think there's I remember when I was doing research for this, I was finding all this information and realizing like I have not once stumbled across Kubrick actually talking himself about his work. And I finally recently just looked up him specifically to see what he had to say about, anything. And it comes down to the gist of it is he really specifically would avoid doing interviews for that very reason, where for himself personally, he didn't like when someone would explain the meaning of something to him before he got to enjoy it even, like especially. So he likes to allow the viewer to indulge in that themselves. Like enjoy a film, glean from it what you want. I'm not going to give you a definite answer because the enjoyment of this medium is to be able to talk about it and discuss it.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
He doesn't put origami unicorns
yeah.
in his movie.
Exactly.
Thank you, Blade Runner.
All right. This is easily our longest episode.
Yeah.
So let's wrap it up there and take a quick break. And on the other end, we're going to review this film, give it our scores, talk about what critics thought, get into some box office, and then a very brief franchise discussion. So stay tuned. Welcome back. Let's review The Shining. David, you gonna pull those scores from that bowl at random?
We've done this so many times, and when you looked at me, I was like, what do you want from me? I'm like, oh, yeah, the thing I do every week.
Yep.
All right, first up is Irina with a 9.5.
Yeah. I think obviously this movie is nearly perfect. I could have used a little more of Jack's descent into madness. He seems almost kind of immediately phased, and while I do think that the accepting of the alcohol is kind of that moment of complete submission, it's still kind of vague, and I guess that was intentional. I just wish they had still included the scene where he had discovered the book. As well as Wendy feeling lesser than what she should have been. Those are my only critiques, and I think it's mostly because, like, this basically filming a movie is an organic work, whether you have it well planned out or not. So these kind of things just sometimes don't work out the way you imagine them to be. I still thoroughly love this movie, and I love anything that has to do with isolation, where there's just like a small group of people having to figure out what's going on and you're cut off from the outer world. Love that stuff. I love that content.
Yeah.
So 9.5 still. Yeah.
Cool.
All
And I
right.
should preface the rest of these reviews with, we've basically reviewed the movie throughout this whole thing.
Yeah.
So these will probably be on the more brief side. Go ahead.
All right. Next up is AJ with a 9.5.
Hey!
So I'm right in line with Irina and what Reese has already said. The criticisms or critiques here, basically, I kind of feel bad for Shelley Duvall's experience, but it is noticeably a deficit where her style and approach did not click with Kubrick's direction. And, if there's stuff that Kubrick wanted to be originally envisioned for the story and flow that didn't make it through the edit, were kind of the lesser for it. I think she was too, kind of limp and weak-willed. I know he was going a 180 from the original book character, but it was too much in stark contrast with Jack. And like Irina said, Jack needed a little bit more of a level ground to start his character regression. I'm completely on board with any kind of ambiguity thematically, and everything that Kubrick has done technically is, unspoken. I mean, there's countless hours and hours of content on everything Kubrick. I mean, it's amazing. The technical marvel of using new innovation to the cameras, the techniques, the mise-en-scène it's all there to pick apart. And this movie is probably the epitome for a horror movie in my book. That's also where I kind of detract in just a personal note. Like I said, this movie gives me nightmares. I'm not lying. Like, I don't enjoy watching this kind of thing, and I appreciate the, picking apart the technical side of it. But that's what kind of keeps it just from a 10, just despite all of its mastery of the technical aspect of it.
Right.
I guess I see where Kubrick was going with the novelty of Halloran's quick death, but I wanted a little bit more. And then also Wendy could have been strengthened if he reined in Jack a little bit in the beginning and kind of leveled him out to be a little bit more of a, I guess, human.
Yeah.
It would have helped. So, yeah.
All right.
That's it, 9.5.
It's funny for you guys that are less horror inclined, because I used to be, whenever I was a kid, I used to think to myself, like, man, I can't imagine the kind of person that would, watch a horror movie by themselves in a dark room.
I still can't.
And then the past couple weeks, I've been watching horror movies by myself in a dark room. So
it's the same. Like, it's not like a scary monster kind of horror for me. It's like the deep darkness of humanity horror. Like that's, and I think Kubrick really did his job well. That's his intent, to shine light out on this stuff, and that kind of, it unnerves me. Like it's
creepy.
It's
definitely.
He was shining
horrific.
a light
It's
on it.
literally horrific. So, yeah.
All right, we have two 9.5s. Let's move on to Reese with a 10.0.
Oh,
Yeah, and this kind of, like, I kind of hand wave away my minor flaws with this movie, which are Wendy and Dick kind of not getting a big hero moment other than to provide for transportation. I think this movie's over 40 years old now, and it is timeless. It is, and Kubrick did so many things for the horror genre with this movie. Like, yes, there were other examples of, like, horror art before The Shining, but this kind of established horror is not just like, oh, for fun, for just to go to have a good scare. Like, there was deeper meaning, layered on top of it, and it's calculated in every scene, and it also gave us probably the most iconic Jack Nicholson performance of all time. I think it's genuinely unsettling throughout the entire thing, throughout the entire runtime. So many iconic moments that I can't get out of my brain. They're literally going to be burned in there until I die. it is my second favorite horror movie, and I will not reveal the first until we cover it on this show. So and I'm just being brief here. I think it's a 10. It's not a perfect movie, but with our scoring, I think it deserves that honor of being a 10 because I find it timeless and just a masterwork. I think it's really, really an impressive feat, and it is truly epic horror.
Groundbreaking, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Next up is David, also with a 10.
Nice.
I definitely think this is a perfect movie as far as what was intended. Anything in between is up to personal preference, I believe, because I think any movie can be made better with more time and more effort. I think what he did with what he had was as far as perfect as you could probably take this. And within the vision of what he wanted it to be. Obviously, we could say Wendy could have more time. Halloran shouldn't have died. There's all sorts of things. But this was Kubrick's vision. And we have to respect that as long as you enjoy what he put in front of you. And I'm not a horror person. And for some reason, my brain can't even categorize this as a horror because of it. I mean, it's on another level.
Because it pushes past what you typically identify as horror, which is just jump scares, cats flying at the screen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not the same on jump scares. They don't set it up the way your normal horror movies set up jump scares.
No.
Just as Yetis with football surpasses what family adventure films are usually like.
Yes.
Every
David
screenshot
notoriously gave The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor a 7 out of 10.
paper.
Continue, David.
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, I think a good sort of thing. The thing that comes to mind is Lord of the Rings.
Oh, surprise!
Right, surprise, surprise. It is a movie that is a 10. Could it have been made better with more? 110%. There are so many scenes left out of that movie that would have made that movie even better. I mean, there's always something you can add.
Yeah. No movie is ever perfect, but that
Exactly.
doesn't mean it doesn't deserve a 10.
Exactly.
Is what you're saying.
There's also a conversation of book adaptation there too. So
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to leave it there because I think that it's where it needs to land. 10. Last but not least is Noah, mirroring the other two with a 9.5.
Yeah, 9.5. I like it a lot.
I mean, he's not wrong, folks.
Is that all?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think everyone said it.
What was your favorite scene?
I really, really liked the bartender scene.
Okay. Yeah.
Lloyd.
Kind of
yeah.
it's the changeover from, it's the tipping point. I mean, he had already tipped, but
I really like the Grady stuff,
if
too.
this were Titanic, the whole time you knew it was going down, but this is whenever it's vertical in the water.
How does this rank among horror movies for you?
Oh, top 5 for sure. Top 3 even.
I bet. Yep.
Yeah.
AJ, you want to crunch those numbers for us?
The Shining has a 9.7 for our group, which ties it with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Huh.
So that's third place behind Sicario at a 9.8 and Blade Runner 2049 at a perfect 10.
Man,
Good company.
Yeah, baby.
Sicario. I forgot how high up that one was.
So we just can't. I mean, what we're saying is Kubrick isn't as good as.
No, that's not actually. You shouldn't view the rankings like that at
I
all.
know.
Look, guys, the numbers are arbitrary. It's just for fun. We like numbers, and it's fun to crunch them.
Like 2, 3, and 7.
Exactly. Or 7, 3, and
Wait,
2.
what's our second
3,
ranked,
7,
our
2.
third ranked, and our 7th ranked movie?
Oh, yeah, it could mean something.
But if you add them up,
12.
well, you really want an answer?
He did. I think
don't
he
know.
did,
I mean,
but it
All right,
beats much-
Sicario
was
is
wait-
2, 3 is The Shining and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and then 7, depending on how you count ties. Let's see. We've got a 3-way tie of Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, A Few Dollars More, and Die Hard.
Now that tells me a little bit of something.
No,
And
I
The
should
Prince of
stop
Egypt is
asking
tied
these
with Die Hard,
questions.
I think.
Abbey Road. That's what I got out of that. All right. Moving on to critics. This movie, back in the day, opened to mixed reviews.
What?
Surprise, surprise. Critics were not super big fans of this. Yeah. No, it's just weird. Like, Kubrick was a respected director at the time, but this came out and it just kind of landed with a thud.
Ebert didn't want to watch this?
Yeah. It didn't get
He did
terrible
eventually
reviews.
and recanted his statement, but
yeah.
Irina actually slipped the answer a little earlier in the podcast. Oh, yeah, it's basically book fans versus non-book fans. So us today, generation that didn't see the book or read the book first, basically get the movie as is and appreciate it for that.
Oh.
The audiences at the time had all read the book first and wanted a direct remake and film version and didn't get that, so they were upset.
So it just upset both camps. This is so insulting, but it was nominated for 2 Razzies at the time.
What?
Yeah, worst director, Stanley Kubrick, and worst actress, Shelley Duvall.
Okay, the whole director thing though had to be a joke though.
No, the Razzies the Razzies are a joke in general, but they will go for the, like, what is the pop culture consensus? Like, what does pop culture think is the worst right now? What? And apparently they looked at The Shining and were like, that should be nominated. It's dumb. Anyway, the movie has been reappraised over time. Obviously, it is a absolute stone cold classic today. A lot of critics have kind of, wheeled back their thoughts, and it now holds a 84% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 93% audience score. Some of those reviews in there are still the old ones, the ancient reviews that are kind of dragging down that tomato meter. On Metacritic, it has a 66, which consists of more of those older reviews, and a 8.8 from audiences out of 10. And on IMDb, it holds an 8.4 out of 10, which is really good on IMDb. Really good. So, a little disappointing on that side, but I kind of get why some of these movies that weren't received well back in the past still carry some of that weight, even though they are viewed today under a completely different light.
They weren't ready for it yet.
Yeah, exactly.
They weren't ready.
Yeah, but now I'm so glad it's kind
all
of
Stephen King's fault.
Yeah, I'm so glad it's kind of getting the appraisal that it deserves. Let's move on to box office. This movie released on May 23rd, 1980. It was a limited release and came out at the same time as Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. So that's kind of a big release, right? A little bit?
Just a little bit.
Yep. The movie was budgeted at the time $19 million, which inflated is $62 million. So we're going to go with the inflated worldwide box office take for this one. Are y'all ready?
Mm-hmm.
Since this was your pick, Irina, I'll give you the last guess on this
Yay.
one. AJ, what's your worldwide prediction for The Shining's box office? And it's inflated.
I'll say double 120.
120. Noah.
Inflated, I'll go 90.
90.
90.
All right. David.
125.
125. And you said 120, AJ?
Yep.
All right. Irina?
130.
What? No.
He boxed you in. She boxed you in.
I hate you.
Irina, you...
No! No!
Ouch. You know how it feels now.
Yeah.
So back in the day, it made 47 million worldwide, but that translates to 154 million. It was not a huge success. It did just enough to kind of turn a profit for Warner Brothers. That and the mixed reviews kind of left a sour taste in their mouth. But yeah, not bad. This is it's very similar to Blade Runner in this way. Blade Runner was more of a bomb than this was. But these franchises, it's weird to call them franchises, but the Blade Runner franchise and the Shining franchise follow very similar trajectories, where these movies were not very much liked at the time of their release. They weren't hated, but they both kind of fell on deaf ears a little bit. both didn't make maybe the amount of money that they deserved to make. They were kind of in the mid-range there. And then they both had sequels come out 40 years later. That also, no, I won't say it. That would be spoiling. But I just find that kind of funny that these are the two franchises that kind of run parallel.
Oh, yeah.
Although one had incredible control by one person, the other had, apparent studio meddling and the director out of control until, 5 edits later.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Well, to be fair, actually, never mind. So Kubrick actually pulled within 24 hours of the first screening and pulled the last scene, like Irina said, the little last photo album thing or whatever. They pulled the last scene. So
really?
That was some I guess director cut maybe.
Weird. Whatever, Kubrick. Anyway, not a lot of franchise talk on this one. The Shining laid dormant for 40 some years.
Frozen.
Sorry, what?
In the ice. Frozen in
Is
the
it
maze.
frozen in ice? Yes.
Yeah.
Ice cream.
This was a Jack Sickle for quite some time. Obviously, though, I don't think this ever had designs on a sequel. So it was just kind of Warner Brothers swept it under the rug, called it a slight profit, and was like, yeah, that was nice. And then it became more renowned and famed over time, kind of aged like a fine wine. Obviously, what changed that was Stephen King finally being pestered enough to write a sequel to The Shining, but that's a story for another day.
Next weekend, in
yeah,
fact.
The Shining is something that, 10 years ago, had you told me that The Shining should have a sequel, I'd be like, definitely not. That's a movie you don't touch. You leave it alone. It's fine as it is. This story does not need to continue. But that did not happen. And next week, we will be talking about the sequel to The Shining, Mike Flanagan's Dr. Sleep.
And we've got dried prunes. Mrs. Torrance, you've got to keep regular if you want to be happy.